Hello everyone, my name is Eden. I'm one of your fellow TRAN 4525 classmates. In this presentation, I'll be teaching you how to use the review section of Microsoft Word to your advantage when translating, with a focus on the comment and track changes features. As translation students, we use Microsoft Word on a near daily basis for our coursework and translations. So I'm sure none of you are strangers to this software, and as a result, this is not going to be a long and boring Word tutorial. However, there are probably some Word features you may not be using to their full potential that could greatly improve the efficiency of your translation process. Today, we'll be covering how you can use specifically comments and track changes to your advantage as you translate. We'll be working mainly in the review section of Microsoft Word, which you can see circled in red on this slide. Before we jump into learning about these features, I'd like to explain to you how I'll be structuring and presenting the tutorials for each feature. Each tutorial will be based around two main translation workflows, independent translation and collaborative translation. So with independent translation, in this presentation, we're going to be specifically looking at the example of a translation student. So, as we all know, we as translation students receive a text from our professors, which we are expected to then translate and revise independently and then send back to the professor. So as you can see in my graphic here, we have the translator self, so ourselves as translators, who are then going to translate the whole text independently. Then in the future, at a later date or time, we are going to come back to the text as revisers, revise it independently, and then we are going to send that translation finished product off to our professor. In the workforce, this can be seen as well, but you would be sending, of course, off to a project manager or to a client directly, especially in the case of freelance translation work. Now, in this process, we obviously can see that there's not a whole lot of interpersonal communication going on. Because there's only one person translating and revising the text, there's not going to be a lot of need for interpersonal communication about the text. However, with collaborative translation, we see something a lot different. So in this case, we would have a group of translators all working on the same text. This is common in the case of translation agencies when there's a really big project that may need multiple translators to work together to complete the translation. So we have multiple translators who translate the text collaboratively, who then send it off to a reviser or a group of revisers, who would then send it back to the original translation team, the translators, for a final polishing, and who would then send it off to their professor, for example, in a capstone seminar, as with the one that many of us are going to complete next semester, or to a project manager or directly to the client. Now, with this collaborative workflow, we can see it requires a lot more communication, interpersonal communication, than translation independently. So given these two very different workflows, I'll be presenting each tool and its uses for both workflows, independent and collaborative. The tools can be used for different purposes in each context, which is why I will explain to you their various uses for each context throughout the presentation. By the end of this presentation, you will have learned how comments and track changes can assist you in both independent and collaborative translation processes, and you'll be able to use them effectively in both contexts. Let's get started with comments. Comments are a seamless way to make suggestions, jot down alternatives, or identify issues in a Word document that you are translating. They allow you to comment on a portion of the translation without actually interrupting the text itself. The Comments tool is found under the Review section of your Microsoft Word editing ribbon, and you can see it here circled within a large red circle. We also, just beneath that, have an example of what a comment looks like in a Word document. So as you can see, the user, Paul C., is commenting on the word benefits. So the word benefits becomes highlighted in red, and that highlighted word is connected by a line to this comment that sits in the right margin of the Word document within something that Microsoft calls a bubble. So this is what a comment looks like in a Word document, and it's what you can expect to see as you try it out yourself and as we go through the rest of the tutorial on comments in this presentation. Why use comments when translating independently? It may seem at first that comments would not be of much use when translating independently, considering that we don't need to consult or communicate with any other people throughout our translation process or explain our translation choices. You may be thinking, I can just make whatever change I want directly in the text and there wouldn't be an issue because I don't need to make sure it's okay with anyone else. However, as we said earlier, it can be really advantageous to think of your translator self and your future reviser self as two different people while you're translating. So you can use comments to communicate with your future reviser self about any issues that you had when translating the text the first time. For example, you can jot down alternatives when you're uncertain of translation choices you may be making. For example, you may be translating a word from your source text that has multiple translations into your target text, your target language. So you may want to use a comment to list the different word choice alternatives in the margin instead of interrupting the text. You can also highlight and identify parts of the text that you had trouble translating the first time around, and just identify any areas of your translation that specifically require a little bit of. Let's try adding a comment. To add a comment, you're going to select the text you want to comment on, in this case the word mainly. Then you're going to navigate to the review section and click on New Comment. You're then going to type your comment into the bubble that pops up in your right margin. Once you're done adding your comment, you just click back into your text in order to exit. This can also be done by right-clicking on the selected text and choosing the New Comment option in the drop-down menu. You will then type your comment into the bubble in the right margin just as before and click back into your text. Once you've finished revising and all of your comments have been addressed, you're going to want to remove all the comments before handing in your final translation. To do so, click on the comment that you want to delete and click Delete in the comment section of the Review tab. This can also be done by simply right-clicking on the comment that you want to delete and choosing Delete Comment in the drop-down menu. Now, if you have a lot of comments in one document, you can speed up this process of deleting comments by going up to the Delete Comments button, choosing the drop-down menu, and choosing the Delete All Comments in Document option. And that deletes all of the comments all at once so that you don't have to go through them each individually. This is an example of how I used comments in a previous collaborative translation internship. I used comments to cite my sources for my translation decisions, including some reference materials given to us by our project manager, and to highlight the reasons behind my choices to our revisor. As you can see, there are a lot of comments here, but Word does a great job of still keeping them organized. And this is very clearly a much more effective form of communication than sending all these sources in an email. Another great feature of comments that can help you out a lot in your collaborative translation process is that you can reply to a comment. To reply to a comment, all you need to do is click on the comment that you wish to reply to. Then once that comment opens up, you can click on the little reply to comment button that pops up in the top right corner of the comment bubble and type your reply into the comment field that shows up. Once you are finished replying, you can click out of the comment and back into your document, just like when you added a comment. The end result will look like this, and it will distinguish between the original commenter and the person or user who responded to the comment. Another way that you can do this is by simply right-clicking on the comment you wish to reply to. You will then choose Reply to Comment from the drop-down menu, and again, type your comment into the response field. And once you're finished, just click back into your document. So let's get started by turning track changes on and off, and also just trying out some revision using track changes. So all you're going to do to turn on track changes is go to the Review tab in the Tracking section and then hit that button that says Track Changes. And from there, you're just going to revise your text as you normally would. So you can see me here taking out some words and replacing them with others. You can see as I'm deleting words like day to day and then replacing them, the markup is popping up. So you can see the balloons or bubbles popping up in the right margin with the changes that I've made, and the additions that I'm putting in are being underlined and reflected in a different color in red. So you can see I make a few different changes here. And then if you want to go and you think, okay, I'm finished tracking my changes, I don't want track changes on anymore, all you need to do is go back up to that button, turn it back off, and then you can continue to make changes and no more balloons or bubbles or markup will pop up. You can continue editing without tracking the changes. So as you may have noticed in the previous slide, turning off tracked changes does not actually remove any of the markup for any of the changes that you have tracked previously before turning off track changes. In order to remove this markup, you need to either accept or reject the changes that you have made. So the reason behind this is that, like I said earlier, when you track changes, you are making it so that your changes are less like concrete changes and more like suggestions that need to later be either accepted or rejected. So in order to do this, we are going to be working in the Changes section of the Review tab, which I am showing you with my mouse right now. And then you're going to just click into the very beginning of your text. So I'm going to click in just before energy. Then you're going to begin just checking either accept or reject based on what you want to do with that change that you have tracked. So I'm going to reject day-to-day operations change because I liked day-to-day better than everyday, and I'm just going to keep going down my changes and accept them or reject them based on what I think is best. This really serves well because it can be like a second revision. Then I see I have this one last change that has not been accepted or rejected. So another way to accept or reject a change is by right-clicking on the change and then either choosing accept change or reject change in the drop-down menu. And there we go. Now all of our changes have been either accepted or rejected and all of our markup is deleted. Now, although the accept and reject process with the track changes can be really beneficial and serve as a second revision for our text, sometimes we don't want to do that or we don't have time to do that in our revision process, and we want to get them all accepted or rejected at once. Luckily, you can do this by clicking the drop-down menus on either the accept or reject buttons at the top in your ribbon, and clicking on Accept All Changes or Reject All Changes in the drop-down menu. And as you can see, that has accepted all of the changes in my text. So if I'm happy with all of the revisions I've made, I can do that. Or if I want to revert back to the original text, I can reject all changes, and there we are. When you're working with track changes in Word, there are many different ways that the markup can display the changes that you have made and tracked throughout your text. So here we have the default markup that Word automatically populates when you track changes, which is all of the changes displayed in balloons or bubbles in the right margin and connected to the place where the change was made in the text. Now, if you wanted to change this, you could go under Review into the Tracking section of the tab and click the drop-down menu of Markup Options. Now, in here, you're going to see a lot of different options that you can play around with to change what your markup looks like with your track changes. You can remove things like formatting, so we see those formatting changes disappear and hide. Or we can see insertions and deletions, and we can remove those so that only formatting and comments show up in our balloons or bubbles. We can then also go under the balloons drop-down menu and see right now we have show revisions in balloons, but we can try show all revisions inline. So by doing that, we remove the balloons from the right margin and we are now seeing all of our tracked changes in line with our text. So here we can see that a deletion is marked with a strike through and our insertions are marked with an underline. So we can clearly see what has been deleted and what has been inserted, but it does make our text a little bit messier. So if we wanted to go back to our balloons, we could easily just revert that in our markup options drop-down. Now, another way we can change how we see the markup for our tracked changes is choosing which revisers changes we want to see at once. So right now we're seeing all of our revisers changes at once, but if we wanted to only see Benoit's, we could click on Eden so that all of Eden's revisions and changes would then disappear and we would only see Benoit's revisions, and this would help us to focus on what he had changed in the text. If we wanted Eden's to pop back up, all we'd need to do is click back on Eden and then hers would be back on the screen as well. And we can do that vice versa. So you can play around with these options and see what works best for you in your personal revision and translation process.